Get a load of this, folks.
Hello everyone, and welcome to the Bob Clampett Show. I hope you like that title. I came up with it all by myself. No one helped me. It's never existed before. Don't bother looking that up, because why would I lie about that? Anyway, as always, joining me today is nobody. That's right. While there's other YouTube channels out there, such as Looney Tunes Critic and Anthony's Animation Talk, that feature a wide array of guests, what you get exclusively at this channel is an utter lack of people willing to talk about Golden Age animation with me. But that's okay, because I don't need a co-host. Anyway, for a while I've wanted to produce something about Bob Clampett and his work at Warner Brothers, Leon Schlesinger. Out of the major directors that had worked on the Looney Tunes and Merry Melody films, Tex Avery, Bob McKimson, Friz Freleng, Chuck Jones, and I would say Clampett would be in there, rounding out the top five. However, since he left Leon Schlesinger's Warner Brothers in 1946, I think, when he was up for the role for the original television adaptation of Superman, but ultimately lost out to George Reeves, his reputation has somewhat become tarnished, as a exaggerator, a plagiarizer, a fibber, whatever, especially by Chuck Jones. I just feel like, his role in the evolution of what made Looney Tunes and Merry Melody films kind of what they are and for what they are remembered for has kind of been lost. There's right now Warner's Archives has been releasing the Tex Avery Screwball Classics and kind of shining a spotlight on him. There's multiple hour-long documentaries of Friz Freleng and Chuck Jones. Chuck Jones has written many books, but there's not a lot about Bob Clampett floating around there. Even though he used to tour colleges and give lectures and so on, there's just scant recordings of those. There's not much in the way of filmed recordings. There's a few, published in magazines here and there, scattered throughout the years. So, a lot of kind of his role has kind of been overlooked, I guess. So, for those of us who are really, big fans of these films, we know who did what and whose contribution was what. But I decided to go ahead and make this to kind of just shine a spotlight on his work and try to focus on things that maybe even big Bob Clampett fans wouldn't necessarily realize was his work or his contributions. So without further delay, we'll get right into his first featured work here, Tex Avery's Porky's Duck Hunt. So why am I featuring a Tex Avery film on the Bob Clampett Show? I'm sure some of you know. Clampett was an uncredited animator for this particular film, and his animation of Daffy Duck, as this was Daffy Duck's debut film, really helped establish who Daffy Duck is and was to become as a character over the next number of years. This film also kind of represents an important transition point for Clampett, as it was one of the last films in which he worked on as an animator before being promoted to a director himself. There are quite a few commentaries on this film floating around, so I'll try not to repeat too much what others have said. So this film was released in April of 1937, and though it was Daffy Duck's first appearance, Daffy Duck would not appear again until the 1938 film Daffy Duck and Egghead, also directed by Tex Avery, and the story co-written by Clampett, and Clampett does voice some of the background characters, some of the ducks, and so on. Oh, I I completely forgot to mention, and obviously anybody who's done a commentary on this film has mentioned it, but this is the first film in which Mel Blanc does the voice of Porky Pig, in addition to doing Daffy Duck, although without a lisp. The original voice of Porky Pig, Joe Daugherty, had a real-life stutter, and it was very difficult to kind of record him doing his lines, and was eventually let go and replaced by Mel Blanc, who was better able to add an idiosyncrasy to the way he talked. In addition to being an uncredited animator for this film, Clampett also co-created the story with Tex Avery, so he had more of a hand in the creation of Daffy Duck than just taking Tex Avery's order of kind of having the duck run away in a zany way and nailing it in a very iconic way. As a gun owner myself, Porky in this opening scene very quickly dispenses away with the four main rules for handling a gun. Always treating the gun as if it's loaded, never having your finger on the trigger unless you actually intend to fire it, never pointing a gun at anything that you're not willing to kill or destroy.
Don't worry, it's not loaded. We'll watch.
So anyway, just try to keep this bit of animation right here in the back of your mind, because I'll revisit it at the end. This right here where he got punched. I know Anthony in his talk notes that the general facade was an apartment, and at the end it changes to a house, but just take note of that particular bit of animation. So I neglected to mention during the opening credits that so Virgil Ross is the lead animator here. His style is always very clean, and whenever there's a naturally expressive face, especially with eyebrows and eyelids, is pretty key to kind of what his animation looks like. And Bob Cannon was the second animator credited. It's his first animation credit, and the last one for about a year. He eventually ended up working for Clampett, but the thing about his style is he had not a knack, but very often he would just not animate characters talking when they were supposed to be talking.
I must have it quiet.
Shut your mouth. So sein sharp. Silence is food.
Anyway, and in addition to Clampett being uncredited, Chuck Jones also worked on Avery's unit and was an uncredited animator on here as well. So one thing to note about this first appearance about Daffy Duck, if you note his bill, there's a little line on the top of his bill that kind of just gives it depth. So that's kind of one key to note when Daffy Duck is present to tell when he was animated by someone different. So as you can see right here, that line on the front of his duck bill is now gone, and then indicating somebody else is animating him there. I suspect that is Clampett doing that particular animation, as that is how Daffy's character looks when he begins acting really zany and outlandish. So another influence of Clampett in this film that I think some people know is this is the first film that really shows a slimmed down Porky Pig. You may have noticed in the very opening they didn't change the opening card, which features his fat face.
That's body shaming!
But if you look at all the Porky Pig films that precede this, all through 37. They slimmed him down a little bit, but this is the slimmest he's been, and generally will continue to be, in all the films thereafter. And that was also another contribution of Clampett. And here's a kind of a recurrent gag that appears, was done by many of the directors. The singing of Moonlight Bay, kind of in a barbershop quartet style, while intoxicated. This animation very much looks like Virgil Ross did it, with the real natural expressiveness you can see on Porky's face. Here you're going to see the reappearance of Daffy Duck, who his character didn't have that name at this time. The model sheet, he was just known as that darn fool duck, which is how the character even references himself. So, as Porky's dog, Rin Tin Tin, whatever his name is, starts to get the duck, just notice how simplistic Daffy looks here. His hands, his feathers, there's no real differentiating on the feathers. The beak's rather round, and so on. And then when we see Daffy here, you can see the feathers actually have fingers now. And this is Bob Clampett's animation, and the first time that Daffy Duck exhibits some of his characteristics that would go on to define him. I suspect that this Daffy Duck scene too was also animated by Clampett. So this is a gag that was similarly done in Porky the Rainmaker, which was also directed by Tex Avery. That involved different weather pills and different farm animals eating the weather pills, and in this case creating this electric effect. And Bob Clampett was an uncredited animator on that film as well. And this is a characterization of the comedian Joe Penner, who his manner of speaking and comedy, Tex Avery used a little bit with Egghead before kind of changing him up there. So, note again the appearance of Daffy Duck here and his bill. Again, you can see that line on the top of the bill giving an angle, which in the next scene is going to be absent here. So he was animated here by somebody different, and then somebody here. Likely Clampett. If not Clampett, once Daffy Duck jumps back into the water, Clampett takes over the animation here as well. And the other remarkable thing to note about this scene is what Daffy Duck is doing here is a almost frame for frame mirror image of what he did in the just a few scenes prior as well. So here I've slowed it down to about 6 frames a second, and I don't know if you can tell or not, but he has actually redrawn this entire scene, the mirror image of it. There's very subtle differences in some of the drawing, and they get out of sync, a frame here or there, and then get resynced up. But it's a pretty remarkable the similarity he was able to recreate for this one scene. A lot of the sounds Daffy makes is kind of a caricature of a comedian of the time, Hugh Herbert, who kind of was animated a lot in Looney Tunes films, and was known for kind of saying, hoo-hoo. So here you can see Porky's face looks rather simplistic and was very likely not Virgil Ross who did him. And then here you can see the change in the expression with the eyes and the eyebrows. So this scene looks more characteristic of what Virgil Ross would have done, as well as this scene here, where he alternates from looking forlorn to angry and so on. And as others note, you can see Porky is so disoriented by his poor hunting outing, he walks into somebody else's house, where in the beginning of the film he was in an apartment. Yet strangely, the exact same neighbor seems to live on the top floor of this house. And when he opens the door, there is no outside, but there's a magic stairwell. So earlier on I told you to keep this bit of animation in the back of your mind. As I'll show you here, I've slowed it down again, you can see that they've simply just reused the animation with just a different background. So as the screen says, that's all, and until next time.